Awesome. Let me check my little clicker here. All right, we're good to go. Awesome. Thank you for coming. I'm here today to talk about thinking outside the blocks. And specifically, of course, the new block editor in WordPress, codenamed Gutenberg. And I'm going to go into a little bit of the how today, so you can think about the strategy, but I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the impact that I believe the block editor is having to the teams that build with WordPress, so everyone here, and then also the brands that rely on WordPress to power their digital business. For those of you who don't know me, my name is David Vogelpohl. In addition to having an incredible family, I serve on the senior leadership team at WP Engine. And it's really special for me to be here in Omaha. This is actually my first trip to Omaha following joining forces with Flywheel earlier this year. And it's really exciting for me to be here firsthand to see the community that you all have built. And I know that we're really excited to continue to contribute to the Omaha community and support Flywheel and everything they do for you all here, and then just Omaha in general. So it's really fun for me to be here and be able to witness all this firsthand. Some other places you might know me from, certainly WP Engine stuff. I also am the brand lead of the Genesis product suite inside of WP Engine. I ran a Genesis agency, WordPress agency, for 5 years. Does anyone in here build with Genesis by chance? All right, we got a few here. It's a framework for building themes. My teams also support the WordPress community in general, committing to WordPress core, other activities throughout WordPress in general. Some of my teams have done things like building the Amazon AI plugin in partnership with Amazon, CloudFlare video stream plugin, and then I host a weekly podcast called Press This. It was actually Joost de Valk's old podcast of Yoast SEO, and so you can check that out if you want to hear about people from around the community. So I want to talk to you today, though, about the block editor in WordPress, and specifically, why is it important and what impacts does it have and what does it mean for us building with WordPress? And one of the reasons I think it's so important is the scale of WordPress. WordPress accounts for 34% of all websites, and that's huge. In 2010, when WP Engine was founded, it was about 11 to 12%. In my agency days, WP Engine was my client back then, and I remember thinking that was basically an entire world of websites. And it's nearly tripled since then, 34%. So it has a huge impact on the web. There is no other website platform that comes even close to what WordPress does in terms of the overall web. For sites that choose to have a content management system, so Google.com, of course, is hand-coded, but for sites that choose it, it's 61%. So it's chosen more than any other way of building websites when a CMS is chosen. And then, of course, you all know this, but WordPress isn't just for small websites and cat blogs. No offense to any cat bloggers in the audience. Jamie, are you a cat blogger? I don't know. Maybe. You'd strike me as a cat blogger. Maybe not. She's shaking her head yes, she's that way. But it's actually in the top sites more likely than the overall web for WordPress to be present, 37% of the top 10,000 sites. So what happens in WordPress core and what we all do with WordPress core has a profound impact on the web. And so that success that we've seen, that we all participate in and all achieve, came, especially in recent years, in spite of the old editor, in spite of the classic editor. This GIF that you're seeing here is a user test. And what the user is trying to do is something we do every day in a million applications with no problem, which is put two pictures side by side. This loops. You'll see it again. Matt Mullenweg showed this video, one of these videos, during his State of the Words talk in Nashville last year when Gutenberg launched. And as we see, it's extremely frustrating for this user. They don't know how to do it. It's not intuitive. If the audio were playing, you would hear the person be like, oh, this must be it. And of course, that's not it. Yeah, absolutely not it. And we know these nuances. We know these quirks. This is part of our language. We understand the limitations of WordPress if we build with WordPress. We have our ways of getting around this. We have our favorite tools. We might use shortcodes. We might hard code things into a template file. We might do all kinds of different techniques in order to achieve the visual outcomes that we wanted to achieve. And we know that the classic editor, TinyMCE, is limited in the way it allows us to express ourselves visually. And so early in WordPress this day, that was fine, but now we have modern content management systems with modern page building experiences, and that will not bring WordPress into the future. And so that's why I feel the Gutenberg release and the capabilities added are so important to WordPress. So Gutenberg modernizes WordPress. Here we see a user video of someone adding columns and titles under the pictures and subtext underneath that, and those that have used Gutenberg understand that, of course, it's easy to add links and other elements and other columns. This particular user is using something called atomic blocks, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but it leverages Gutenberg. We have, let me see if my laser works here. Okay, I'm not going to try the laser because I'm totally going to mess this up. But we have the design controls there on your left, so I can control the width, I can control the color, I have a lot more flexibility in my designability. Now, of course, that's great. It's good to have that control. It's good to have that flexibility. But why does that matter? Why does it matter to the web? Why does it matter to WordPress? And what is the impact that it has on the teams and brands that rely on WordPress? One of the reasons I think it matters for me is that Gutenberg introduces a change in mindset. In the old way, we would build websites. The client would come to us with an idea. We would have a meeting. We would create a mock-up. We would modify the idea. We would create a design file. We would then take that design file and go make a website or a web page. Now, in that process, those that are developers or website builders understand that you componentized a lot of your workflow. You would save your little snippets of code, your favorite plugin, pages you had built, sites you had built, and you would use those components to help yourself work faster. So it would allow you to create projects more quickly, more efficiently. If you're a freelancer or agency, make a higher profit from that. And the outcome of that, though, was not modular. The content creator, the site owner, could not easily use those modules. We might create custom post types that they might be able to create multiple versions of the post, but grabbing the components within the sites and pages that we built just wasn't possible fundamentally with most sites that we built for the content creator. And so my view of this is that it requires Gutenberg, the block editor, puts us in a position where we need to change our mindset. I think as developers and as builders, we think about that componentization of site building, but what the Gutenberg editor allows us to do is to take that componentized approach and bring it all the way down to the page creation level. Now when you hand that site off, when you hand that page off to the content creators, to the marketers, to the site owners, they can reuse those components as they create new pages for their website, as they create new experiences. And I'm going to talk about why that's important. What you're seeing here are screenshots from the plugin Atomic Blocks, which I mentioned earlier. Atomic Blocks is on WordPress.org. You can go check it out. And these are what are called layouts. Obviously, a template of a pre-designed element of a web page, or basically an entire web page. Every single thing you see here is a block. Everything you see here is configurable by the end user, and you can separate these blocks and use them in other contexts. So now marketing teams and even your own internal teams can leverage these kind of collection or arsenal of blocks to reuse them over and over and over again in the pages that you create. And so I think bringing this into WordPress core is fundamental and important, and it really changes the mindset of I'm going to go build a static site, so I'm going to build something that's now dynamic and living and componentized that I can use over and over again. And this can have a huge impact. In the last 12 months, prior to that, WP Engine on our websites took this approach. We created components, we created blocks for our marketers and content creators to use. In the last 12 months, our marketers, and that's not all of them, but I didn't have room for all of them, created 2,074 different types of web pages, mostly landing pages that are associated with campaigns and ad buys and new products and all kinds of things. And they only needed a developer's help on 24 of them. That's about 1% of the time. Now, the way it worked before this, when I joined WP Engine back in 2015, one of the first teams I led was our internal web development team. And it worked exactly like I described it earlier. We would have a meeting with a stakeholder. They would tell us their idea. We would then go back and create a wireframe. We'd have another meeting to talk about the wireframe. Then we'd go make a design, and we'd have another meeting to talk about the design, and they would change their mind, and we'd change the design again. And then they would make up their mind, and we'd settle on the outcome, and then we would go code the landing page and show it to them, and they would change their mind again. And we'd have to uncode the page and recode it back the way they wanted it. And nobody liked that. The marketers hated it. All of this time between idea and reality. And of course, the marketers, stakeholders, and customers need things like tomorrow. Has anyone ever had a customer say they need something like 2 months from now? Anyone? No? Nobody. I think in my 5 years of agency, I think I had one customer say they didn't need it tomorrow. So of course the marketers hated that. The developers and the designers hated it. Who likes uncoding that page because the customer changed their mind? Nobody likes that. And especially if your development team or you as a developer are trying to push what you do, try to address more and more complex builds and more complex technology and interesting things to work on, landing pages are not that fun. For our developers, especially the advanced one, those landing page tickets were soul-crushing. That's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to push themselves further and do more complex things. And even if you're on the lower end of complexity with your development, it's still helpful to be able to push yourself and try new things. And so this was one of the outcomes that we saw by deploying these approaches. There's another issue that I think the block editor is uniquely positioned to help solve for. I went to the session on landing page optimization earlier, some really good tips in there. And there's something that I call the landing page failure paradox. A friend of mine, her name is Claire Vaux, she founded a company called Experiment Engine. And what it was like a journal for my A/B testing. So you would kind of explain what your tests were, and then you would record the results, and then you would look at the history of that to inform what you might do next. Her company was actually eventually purchased by Optimizely. She rose to become the VP of product of Optimizely. But the data she shared from Experiment Engine with me was that 80% of the time in an A/B test, the B fails to beat the A. 80% of the time when a marketer and a designer sit down to purposely increase the outcome of a landing page, sales, leads, whatever it is, 80% of the time they fail. What this teaches us, and of course we've learned this in the last 10 years with A/B testing, is that there is no perfect answer. If you've ever seen the show Mad Men on Netflix, the characters will all go out and get drunk and come back the next day and be like, this is the perfect answer. And what A/B testing tells us is that's actually not the way it works. We are terrible in our first idea, and we must iterate over and over and over again. So that's the landing page failure paradox. But why is it exponential? So in the last 10 years, it was quite static. People would come in, maybe from Google, maybe from other places, but it was this kind of notion of a static funnel. But in today's world, we have many, many sources of customers. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have organic search, we have paid search. We have any number of ways visitors might come to our site. And we actually know more about those visitors now. Through personalization, through identifying who an individual user is. What kind of user are they? Are they, in our sense, it might be a marketer or a developer. In your sense, it might be a different kind of persona. Every traffic source, every piece of data that you have that you're able to target on creates a new cohort in A/B testing, a new group to test your message against. And this is where the exponential part of the landing page failure paradox comes in. We have more cohorts than ever, more groups of users than ever to test our messaging against. And the block editor in WordPress, that flexibility, that capability to create 2,000 pages in 12 months, 2,000 landing pages in 12 months from a team of marketers, that is enabled by the block editor, that is enabled by Gutenberg. And so you can very quickly go in and make decisions like, well, I want my pricing at the top and my image at the bottom. I want to try this headline on this group and then the image there. And it allows us to iterate much, much more quickly. And so as we have more information, as we have more sources of traffic, as we have more needs to iterate and try new approaches, Gutenberg, the block editor, is uniquely positioned to allow us to iterate on that messaging more quickly. And I think that's one of the huge impacts that the block editor is having to WordPress. So, for those of you that might not be developers or site builders or are worried about your job with Gutenberg, Don't lay off your web developers, hire more of them, and that's exactly what we did. During the Gutenberg release, one of my team members, a guy named Anthony Burchell, was one of the release leads of Gutenberg. There were, I think, 7 people from around the world that were chosen to help bring that release to WordPress. And part of that role, of course, was technical and organizational, but it also was engaging with the community. And I'm sure many of you in this room felt that anxiety as Gutenberg was about to be released into WordPress core. And this was one of the key concerns. If we have Gutenberg, what do we need designers and developers for? Are any of your clients good designers, by the way? Any of them? No. Right? You're always going to need designers. And Gutenberg, the block editor, doesn't abstract out the need to have developers. So why did we have all those marketers build all those pages but need these developers? Does anyone want to wager a guess as to why we hired more of them, even though the marketers were self-serving more pages? Yes, sir. Go for it. That's exactly right. The work that our development team, our web development team, was doing was more valuable. They were creating things that allowed our marketers to iterate more quickly, to try new ideas, to get new product launches to market faster. Our R&D team works so fast, sometimes they release things and the marketer's like, wait, we don't have a product page yet. By enabling our marketers with libraries, with an arsenal of components, that made them work quicker, get things to market faster, iterate more quickly, and what the teams were building was more valuable. And we needed more of those components. We needed more of those blocks. We needed more capabilities within those blocks. The blocks we create are integrated. One of the ones I'm most proud of is our news and resources component. The marketer drops in the news and resources component, and it pulls in blog posts, not only from our WP Engine blog, but our publications Torque and Velocitize, and all of that happens automatically. So it's not just a design tool, it's also an integration tool. So the web team and the designers and everyone started coming up with new ideas. What are new blocks that we can add? What are new components that we can add? How can we empower our marketers, our content creators, and ourselves to be able to build more quickly? I think this is another thing to consider, especially if you're not a developer. If you're a site builder or site assembler, using kind of off-the-shelf tools to build your sites, is that you can also leverage these blocks to make your job faster. I've serviced a lot of dentists. None of my dentists, in terms of building websites, none of my dentists actually went in and edited their own site. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't use a componentized approach. I still would. It's just that I would use it. With the new block editor, especially as you start looking at themes and plugins that pull in blocks automatically, you can have a starting point to build a very good-looking functional site and have it completed in 1 to 2 days. As a freelancer, that's huge. You can sell sites like that for $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. It enables you, even if you're not a developer, to move quickly. But if you are a developer or have a team of them, like we did, we have them focus on building new components. Now, of course, they still do it the old way for certain experiences on the site. But by taking the componentized approach, it empowers others, and it makes their work more interesting. So I want to talk now a little bit about the how. What are your options for building your block arsenal? And what are some of the considerations around the strategy? Before I do that, though, how many people have built one thing that's been on a live website using Gutenberg? All right. I would say that's probably about 30% of the audience. I asked the same question in Australia 2 weeks ago at a different conference, and I'd say about 20% of the people raised their hand. So you're ahead of the pace relative to Sydney, I suppose. So that's good, because what I'm going to talk about now are some of the specifics around... I'm going to move that mouse. I don't know how that got up there like that. Is that distracting anyone else or just me? There we go. Okay. Good. So we're going to talk now about some of your options, bless you, and some of the considerations as you think about building out your block arsenal. So the first option you have, of course, are the blocks that are included in WordPress core, called core blocks. And if you played around with Gutenberg, you're probably familiar. You have the paragraph block and the gallery block and so on and so forth. So these are common website elements that are included in WordPress core. Now, of course, you can style those blocks. You don't have to use the styles that come out of the box with Gutenberg. You can create custom styles for each of those blocks to reflect the brand that you're trying to design for. So that's the first easy win, is just use the blocks that are in Gutenberg. You don't have to use them exactly like they look. You can customize them to reflect the brand you're building for. The benefits of core blocks is, one, they're already included in there, and they're also, of course, maintained by the WordPress core contributors. So you don't have to personally maintain those blocks. There's kind of pluses and minuses there, meaning you're kind of waiting on them for the next iteration of the block. But again, that work is not a problem that you have to solve for. Your other choice is to use block libraries like atomic blocks or co-blocks. And these are generally collections of blocks that provide more variety than the core blocks that are available inside of WordPress itself. Atomic blocks and co-blocks are both free plugins available on WordPress.org, so go check them out. But what the benefits there, of course, is, again, you don't have to do any work to create the blocks, and you don't have to do any work to maintain the blocks. And then you're also able to customize the styles of those blocks, again, to reflect the kinds of sites that you're trying to build. Another option is blocks contained within plugins. I've heard a lot of discussion here around different page builders. I know the landing page session earlier talked a lot about Divi. Elementor is one of my favorite ones. Has anyone tried Elementor? Any Elementor users in here? It's a really good product. When Elementor came out, when Gutenberg came out, Elementor, Beaver Builder, Divi, everyone asked, Gutenberg or X page builder? Gutenberg or Elementor? Gutenberg or Divi? Elementor took a really interesting approach and actually embraced Gutenberg and actually leveraged blocks within the context of their plugin. And so that's one option you have as you think about building out your block arsenal is, well, what plugins might have blocks that might be useful for me? Yoast has this block. It's called a structured data block. Who in here uses schema in the sites that they build? Schema.org schema. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Schema.org is a project that was launched by Google, and it's basically a defined and structured way of marking up your content so that it makes it easier for Google to parse or to basically cut up. And so what Yoast did when Gutenberg came out is they created a few of these structured blocks, which in this case, this is a how-to list. And I like this example because it illustrates the capabilities of blocks. I know it's a little hard to see in the back, but I'll tell you what's going on here. At the very top, we have metadata. And this is the time needed to complete the how-to task. How long is it going to take me to, in this case, it's actually a how-to on how to create a structured block. But how long is it going to take me to make that block? We have step 1, step 2, step 3. I can delete steps. I can add new steps. I can reorder steps. I can add images to steps. I can add all of these things. So this is a pretty typical block building experience. Where it's different, though, is what you're not seeing is behind the scenes when the page is rendered on the front end, that content is annotated with the schema markup. And what Google does with these how-to schema markup blocks is they show them inside of Google search results. If you run a recipe site, if you have how-to listings, all of these views in Google are not accessible for the most part unless you're using schema. And so I like this example from Yoast because, one, it illustrates that, hey, my plugins might have blocks I can use, but it also illustrates the extensibility of blocks, that blocks can be used to connect your content to other things. We even have blocks that pull content in from other places. In this example, while this block will make a how-to list on my website, it will also show specialized views of my content on Google.com. And to me, this is one of the powers of the Gutenberg editor and blocks, is that it's not just the ability to easily create experiences on your website, you can also kind of push and pull experiences in from other places. The other option you have, and this is one that I'm super excited about, although it requires certainly a developer, to do is to create 100% custom blocks, blocks from scratch. For those of you that follow the WordPress community, you might recall a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, Matt Mullenweg, it was in Philadelphia, got on stage and said, "Learn JavaScript deeply." Did anyone actually do that yet? Wait, that guy did. Him too. So Gutenberg uses React as part of its technology stack. So if you're not familiar with JavaScript or you don't know it deeply, if you are rooted in PHP and that's just not something, so this might not be very accessible to you. But if you are able to learn it, or if you are able to hire people or partner with people that can help you with this, it unlocks an almost infinite amount of power on your website. If you go to this little URL, LITT URL, /block editor HB, you'll find the block editor handbook on WordPress.org. So this is the RTFM option. Read the freaking manual. This is the manual. The content team, yeah, right? The content team did a really good job here. So it will walk you through kind of getting started, what your considerations are. It will also illustrate what are basically called components within the core blocks. In this case, you happen to see a button group. So as you do go to create your own blocks, you can leverage the components that are already there to move faster. And this is why I'm most excited about, because, again, it is your imagination is the only limit in terms of the blocks that you're going to build to empower the sites that you build, empower your teams, and empower the marketers or content creators or site owners that might be using these sites. If you are going to start this journey, one place you could start is create Gutenblock. It is a tool which basically walks through step by step how to build a custom block. I mentioned atomic blocks earlier. Wow, I got a little fly flying around. That's crazy. So I mentioned atomic blocks earlier. The lead developer, the creator of atomic blocks, is a gentleman named Mike McAllister. And he actually started his block building journey with Create Gutenblock. So it comes highly recommended. He actually ended up developing his own workflow, but Create Gutenblock was a great starting point for him because it helped familiarize him with the technology and what was necessary in order to build custom blocks. Matt Mullenweg also mentioned this during the State of the Word address in Nashville last year as a great example of Gutenberg technology, and in particular, getting started with learning how to build Gutenberg blocks. Create Gutenblock is an open source project. It's completely free. There's not even any paid upgrades or anything like that. It was contributed and made by a gentleman named Ahmad Awas, who is based in Pakistan, and he's an avid open source contributor in the WordPress space. So if you're a developer, I definitely recommend you check out Create Gutenblock. Another option you have, especially if you didn't learn JavaScript deeply, I definitely recommend that you beef up your JavaScript chops, is a product called BlockLab. Again, free plugin on WordPress.org. The way BlockLab works is you create field and option sets inside of WordPress admin. So you go into WordPress admin, you add a new field that you're going to include in your block. You can add additional metadata around it, add options and icons, and all the things that you would normally add to a block. The cool part about BlockLab is it abstracts out the JavaScript part. You don't actually have to learn React to learn BlockLab. BlockLab creates the fields, creates the options, and then you just style the block. So if you're used to creating custom themes and custom template files, you can totally use BlockLab without actually knowing React. Now, it's really helpful if you, again, haven't learned React, haven't learned JavaScript. But actually, even if you have, for those 2 people that learned it deeply, it helps speed up your workflow. So I'm a big fan of BlockLab. It's made by contributors out of Australia. I actually got to meet them a couple of weeks ago. I gave a similar presentation, and I didn't include BlockLab in it. And they came up to me after and were like, hey, you got to check this thing out. And I did, and here it is. So I actually liked it. Got folks internally, of course, to also look at it. But the reason you do this is to increase your efficiency. The reason you do this is to increase the teams you serve efficiency. It is to create a powerful website that content creators love to use. I remember when we started this journey at WP Engine, created our components, created our blocks. One of the first responses we got from the content creators was, I don't make web pages. I don't know how to do that. I don't want to do that. No, you do that. I tell you my idea, and you come back to me with a web page. It was actually resistance from some people. But as they were trained, as they realized what the capabilities were, they realized that they could bring their idea to reality in an afternoon, not in 3 weeks, not waiting around for the web team to get to it. And of course, the web team also enjoyed that. Innovation with blocks is just getting started. I remember during the lead up to the Gutenberg launch, people were trying the Gutenberg plugin, playing around with it, and I hate this, I hate that, this isn't where it needs to be, I wish it did this, this isn't exactly like this other thing I like to use. It's still early days. And there's still products being created around Gutenberg and the block editor that are improving it and providing better experiences. And I think the other thing people really need to get their head around is that the block editor is not a magic wand. You're never going to have to, it's not like you're never going to have to design again. It's not like you're never going to have to code again. It's just that within core, those capabilities are now much more accessible and flexible for those that are able to take advantage of it. And there are easy buttons. Atomic Blocks is a good example of that. CoBlocks is a good example of that. A lot of themes that you can buy in the ecosystem use the block editor to make an easy button. So those blocks magically show up. So they're styled, so they're integrated. So again, you can use them effortlessly. But I wanted to give some examples of how people are innovating with blocks today. WooCommerce, of course, product of Automatic, the lead company supporting the overall WordPress project, donates the most amount of energy, the most amount of time, the most amount of money to supporting WordPress, making it better, is revolutionizing, in my view, the way e-commerce is done. So again, just like earlier, where I mentioned all of the different cohorts, all of the different ways I needed to iterate, that is especially true in the world of e-commerce. And so within WooCommerce itself, in its native functionality, Woo is embracing the block building experience. So if you're building sites, if you're styling sites, if you're trying to think of ways to make them unique and innovate, leverage the blocks within plugins, especially plugins like WooCommerce. Adjacent platforms, non-WordPress platforms, are integrating and embracing WordPress with blocks. Has anyone ever built a site on BigCommerce? I have. The product management piece is awesome. Edit products real easily, order management, all of that stuff. CMS, not so great. The majority of BigCommerce's customers use WordPress for their marketing site. The majority of them. BigCommerce found this out by polling their customers and seeing what they were using. So what was BigCommerce to do? Go out and make their own fully fledged content management system that was just as good as WordPress, had the flexibility and ecosystem that WordPress benefits from? Of course not. They would have to invest tens of millions of dollars in order to achieve that outcome. And even then, would they convince people like you all to switch what you're doing and go do that instead? Of course not. It's a losing game. So what did they do instead? Is they embraced WordPress. And they did it at a time when Gutenberg was just released. And so what BigCommerce has created is a plugin, which includes a ton of blocks, that essentially offloads the product management piece, the order fulfillment piece, the integration piece to the BigCommerce platform, and allows you, as a WordPress site creator, to embed that content exactly like you would any other e-commerce site. You can have the checkout, you can have product pages, you can have category pages. We have the ability to log in to see your cart in the top of the site. Every capability that you would have when you're building an e-commerce site in WordPress is available with the BigCommerce plugin. But this leverages something called offloading, which I'll touch on in a second, which is basically to say that all of the data of your orders and all of the processing power required to do those e-commerce transactions is pushed off to the BigCommerce platform. And WordPress, and this is important, because when you push all of that work off, your WordPress sites become faster. And so that was how BigCommerce approached this. And they took a block-first approach to this to enable content creators to be able to, and site owners and agencies and freelancers, to be able to deploy those experiences faster than ever. Another example of offloading is this plugin that was made that is basically called the CloudFlare Stream plugin. What this plugin does is it connects to the CloudFlare Video CDN. For those unfamiliar with the CDN, Content Distribution Network, basically what it is thousands of servers all around the world that contain either chunks of your website or, in this case, videos. So that way when someone's downloading the content or the video, it's happening on a server closer to them, which speeds up the video. Now again, that word offloading, remember that word. Because if you can take work and push it outside of WordPress, that means your server doesn't have to work as hard to serve up every visitor. And so when you embed a YouTube video, when you embed a Wistia video, when you embed Vimeo, or in this case, CloudFlare Video CDN, the video is stored somewhere else, and the processing power to serve the video is also done on a different computer, which means that the server that runs your website has more resources in order to make the site go faster. And so what CloudFlare did is, we actually built this plugin in partnership with CloudFlare, is it uses the native media gallery in WordPress. So these videos all exist out in the video CDN. And when you embed the video in your site via a block, and it's configurable and can autoplay and has all kinds of other options, that video is pulled in from the video CDN, and then is displayed on your website. And when it is played on your website, again, it's not taxing your server. So this is another example. So blocks are not just design elements. They can connect to other things. They can pull content in. They can push content to other places. And so when you think about blocks, don't just think about them as design elements. Think about them as functional and integratable. And some of them are easy to use and require no development at all. The CloudFlare Video Stream plugin, you really don't need to be a developer at all in order to leverage it. The block editor is also blurring the line between content management systems. About a month or two after Gutenberg was released into WordPress, I was in a social thread, and someone was really, really, really upset about Gutenberg. I won't name you by name, but who here was really upset about Gutenberg at some point in your life? All right. I think we have a couple of people and then a few liars. It was a big deal, right? Nobody likes the new Facebook, right? Nobody likes change. You're rooted in your workflows. You're rooted in what's comfortable. And I remember one of the things that gentleman said, and he had, the list that we all had that was, I'm concerned about this or concerned about that. And I remember him saying, what has Matt done for the web outside of WordPress? Gutenberg is just about controlling the web. I was like, well, what are you talking about? It's open source, and it's used by thousands of different companies for thousands of different purposes. And, individuals that might be behind WordPress leadership don't benefit from all of those things. If anything, this was a contribution to the web. He's like, name one thing they did for Drupal. So I did. Drupal incorporated Gutenberg into Drupal. And other content management systems are also leveraging the open source editor. So the importance here is that it's blurring the line between CMS. So now contributions that are made in the WordPress community can also benefit the Drupal community. Contributions made in the Drupal community can benefit the WordPress community. Gutenberg, the block editor, is helping to blur the lines between content management systems. And we don't fully understand what that means yet and what the benefits are. We are seeing some of them now, but some of them are still yet to be defined. Some of them are still yet to be invented. So you might be thinking, what are the next big things for the block editor for Gutenberg? There's all kinds of specifics. I'm not going to get into all that here. If you go to WordPress.org, you can find information about, basically there's a post that announces each release of WordPress that's coming up and explains what the details are. If you really want to absorb the fire hose, if you would, join the WordPress core Slack channel. They talk all about all the different components within WordPress and what's coming up, and Gutenberg is certainly part of it. But I think the main thing to absorb here is that Gutenberg will extend to all parts of the site. Your header, your menu, the sidebars, and footer. So if you think about that for a minute, especially like say you're a publisher, the sidebar is your most valuable asset. It's where your ads are. It's where your newsletter subscription is. And so having that ability to iterate, come up with new ideas, and get those new ideas to market faster are going to be, even in the publisher's case, more important on the sidebar than in the content area. And so these capabilities are coming. Now let me ask another question. When Gutenberg was released, when 5.0 released, and for those that did update, and please update your WordPresses, did it blow up your site? No, it didn't. WP Engine, our support, we prepped our support people. Oh my God, you better watch out, it's coming. Other hosts did the same thing, and it was a non-event. What's that?
Yeah, we did some prepping people.
Sure. Everybody prepped. You installed the Classic Editor plugin, make sure it was good. We had a whole Tiger team around this. And when it came out, it was like, what do we have a Tiger team for? So I would say don't fear that change. The core team understands that updating WordPress can't break a third of the web. Have a little faith. And I think in 5.0, they accomplished that. In Gutenberg, they accomplished that. What's that? Y2K? Yes, Y2K. Yes. Right. So much fanfare on Y2K, yet nothing happened. There's other interesting things going on, and one of the things that I thought was interesting was a proposal in Core around essentially a block directory. And this is a mock-up of a block directory. This hasn't been approved to roll into WordPress Core or anything like that, but you're starting to see more and more innovation, not just in the ecosystem, but also in Core itself, as well as a ton of capabilities. So again, watch WordPress or watch those posts, and then join Slack if you'd like to get really, really in the details of what's coming next. So the last thing I'll leave you with is this notion that we are living in one of the biggest, I believe to be one of the biggest moments in WordPress history. This timeline I share every month with training classes at WP Engine, new employees that come in, to help orient them to the WordPress in general, if they don't already know about it, or the ecosystem, and to help understand how the platform has evolved over time. And there are 3 moments that stand out to me. The first is widgets and shortcodes. This happened back in 2007. For me, this was the moment where people said, oh my God, you can use WordPress to make a website, not just a blog. This was when WordPress, in my view, was recognized as a content management system. I can make a website now. In 2010, custom post types and custom meta fields were created and added to WordPress core. This was also a defining moment for identifying WordPress as a true CMS. As you think about a true CMS, there are fields that control content on the front end, and this was a key moment in the history of WordPress. This was when WP Engine was founded. This is when huge agencies in the ecosystem were founded. Companies like 10up and Crowd Favorite. This is when a lot of the products and plugins that we all use today came into existence, was in 2010 and the years following. Those capabilities in WordPress core, again, going from 11 to 12% of the web to 34% of the web, in my view, spawned back there in 2010 with custom post types and custom meta fields. The reason why I believe is because it made WordPress more usable to the content creator. And it also eventually made it more extendable by allowing capabilities like the REST API in WordPress core. And then in 2018, in December of 2018, Gutenberg was released into WordPress core. And we're not even a year past that date. The tools that we've already seen in the ecosystem, the brand that we've seen using it, the impacts that it's having to the teams and the people that build their digital business on top of WordPress has just started. People in this room will create tools. People in this room will create experiences for customers. People in this room will leverage this technology to make their workflows and the workflows of those they serve better. And we've only started that in December of 2018. December 2019, of course, will be the 1-year mark. So everyone in this room, it's like winding the clock back to 2010 and being in that starting point. The sites that you build, the experiences you deliver for your customers, that will define your place in that future. That will define your opportunities and your ability to grow. So by embracing it today, by innovating today, and by building sites that empower content creators, marketers, and yourself to bring ideas to market faster, to deal with the exponential landing page failure paradox. This is your moment. This is the moment we all live in and the opportunities that we get to take advantage of. That's it for my content, and I have 5 minutes for questions. Anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
So with, you mentioned Ruby and Elementor, Beaver Builder, themes in general and stuff like that. One of the early kind of fears was how does this play with themes that have their own page builders and stuff like that. Where do you foresee Gutenberg fitting in with page builders in the future and stuff like that? Will it eventually just augment those things? Will it replace them? Will they build on top? Like, how do you see that ecosystem shaping?
I'll repeat the question for the rest of the room, but the question is, how do I view the block editor affecting page builders like Elementor and Divi in the future? I've had the opportunity to speak to the product and leadership of some of these tools. I won't mention specific ones and their specific feedback by name, but each one is taking its own approach. Elementor is embracing the block editor and using it in the context of its page building experience. Atomic Blocks is a plugin that leverages the Gutenberg editor at its core. And so I view those strategies as very similar, meaning that they're leveraging the Gutenberg technology and adding value on top of it. And so I think that's going to be one phase you see. Other page builders have looked at embracing Gutenberg in the same way Elementor did, but said, no, that's not what we are about. Some of them have said statements like, we're for designers, or we have taken this approach and we believe in this approach. And I think to me that's the power of WordPress. WordPress is an open framework. You don't have to do it the Gutenberg way. You don't have to do it the Elementor way. You don't have to do it the Divi way. You choose what's right for your business. And so some of these page builders have doubled down and said, we're not going to embrace Gutenberg in that way. We believe our way to be the correct approach. And for customers that choose our path, then we are the right choice. And if they choose another path, we're not the right choice. So I think in some cases, I think that, yes, people will choose Gutenberg over some of these other solutions in some cases. But I know many of you rely on some of these tools today. And, again, Gutenberg, early days, these other platforms are years ahead in some cases. And so I think people are going to choose the solution that's best for them. And yes, those capabilities being in core will kind of shrink that market share a little bit for some of those tools. But I don't personally see them going away. Some of those are very excellent tools. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Is there any generally accepted timeline for when the block approach will be used for, and I'm just barely messing around with WordPress, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but for the header, the footer, and the sidebar, is there any general feel for how many months, years, decades until it's all just block, everything?
So the question for the group is, how long will it take Gutenberg to get into the header, sidebar, and footers? There have been some movement recently, and if I remembered the specifics, I could tell you a date. But I would say that we're probably looking at, maybe 1 to 2 years before it encompasses all of those things. And some of those things, header, I believe, is being attacked first. That could be a case of months. So, yes, sir.
Are you saying essentially that Gutenberg can replace themes then?
Will Gutenberg replace themes? And I'll end on this question. There is no stated feature now that would say that were true. Again, we have the issues of backwards compatibility, and I know we all have sites built on themes, but I do think that the notion of what a theme is will change. It could evolve to be more of a collection of configurations rather than a collection of template files and so on and so forth. So it is possible in the future that we might see an outcome like that, but right now there are no specifics that have been discussed or released relative to that. We all have themes we use. WP Engine even has themes we distribute. And so I think it's important to all of us that the tools that we use today are continued to be useful to us, but I don't see a moment that is on the horizon right now where you're going to have to go kill all of your themes. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for having me.